Who here has had formal training on personal accountability and holding other people accountable? Can I see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, about 5 people have had. Isn't it interesting that we're this far along in our careers and most of us really have never really dealt with that issue? So I think today there are 3, I'm just going to share 3 things with you, but personal accountability, holding other people accountable, is really a game changer. And so I'm confident that as a result of this today, we can provide some game changing for you. The key is to that, of course, is working the system. Earlier last year, this book by Sam Carpenter was brought to our attention. I think it's a fabulous book. If you haven't read this, it's a game changer as far as your business. What it really taught us was that we need to learn to go one layer deeper and get beyond the obvious of what's going on. And so that's what we're really going to do today. We're just going to apply that to accountability. So we're going to just cover 3 accountability methods and systems. There's a lot more information out there. You can probably go to a lot of the bookstores and get incredible volumes of information. I have found that we don't need a lot of information. These books by James Allen, Jim Rohn, and by Earl Nightingale, I caught onto these books fairly early in my career and have practiced the works that these folks had. So most of my career has been around learning from people like this and applying that to the business. In addition to that, locally here, I supervised 100 commissioned salespeople. So you can imagine if you've got that kind of stuff going on, you've got to get pretty good at holding people accountable. And so I have some pretty practical application to that. It's interesting what Earl Nightingale says here about our potential. I've always been a student of my personal potential, recognizing that I have a lot to learn and gain, and also working with other people. So today I hope that we can give you a few ideas that will help you achieve your own personal potential to a greater degree. It's interesting, the masters tell us that 85% of us tend to not take personal responsibility. So we talk a lot about it, but we don't always act on it. And so today we're going to give you some good ideas about how to do a better job of taking responsibility for ourselves and our lives. James Allen, one of those people that I referenced earlier, says that men and women are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. So we want a better life, but we don't necessarily see ourselves as an important part of creating that better life. In addition to that, a couple of my favorite things are this little book on habits, Habits Die Hard, and The Power of Discipline. So we can have great accountability systems, but if you look back into what you do and what you don't do well, it usually has something to do with the habits that we have or don't have, and the way that we don't follow through on our personal discipline. There is a self-assessment on your table that you can look at at your own leisure. If you're not sure how all of this applies to you, that little questionnaire there might give you some insights about whether or not you want to focus on this. I just put that together because it's important that we have some follow-on to what we're talking about. But habits die hard. There's a reason why we put all of these New Year's resolutions together, and we're going to do this in the year and this in the year, and then nothing really happens. That's because the habits that we have, we've practiced. In my case, I've practiced these habits for 70 years, so probably not likely that I'm going to change them very easily. So these habits do die hard and can be hard to change. So today we want to teach ourselves to see 3 situations in a new way. Everyone says, oh yeah, I write goals. Everyone always tells me, oh yeah, I have goals. The problem with that is usually they're not written down, and so it's very important that we do that. The other thing is, though, that we tend to get caught up in the outcomes of the goal. I want to grow my business by, or I want to make X amount of money, but we don't generally drill down into the activities that it's going to take in order to accomplish those goals. And this is a big game changer. So I'm talking with Don Barry a couple weeks ago, and Don was telling me about a little system, and I can't imagine a better way to describe what I'm talking about. So what Dawn does, I would encourage you, by the way, to talk with her if you like this idea. Dawn just wins the day. She wins the day, she wins the week, she wins the month, she wins the year. So what Dawn did is she took the activities that she knows will cause her to be successful. She listed those activities, and then every day she works on those activities and she works to win the day. Not this huge, I'm going to get all of this stuff done. She's just going to win the day. If she wins 3 out of 5 days, I think, Dawn, is that right? 4 out of 5 days. If Dawn wins 4 out of 5 days, then she wins the week. And how many do you have to win?
3 weeks out of the month.
Okay, so then 3 weeks out of the month, then you win the month. I love that system. First of all, you decided what activities you need to focus on, which most of us, haven't worked through that process. And then every day we're measuring that, and there's a way to, hold ourselves accountable for. So that's just one way. I give you that illustration because I can't imagine a better way to do it, but I'm sure Dawn can elaborate on that system and give you a little bit greater detail. So it isn't good enough to just know where you're going, but you need to know what those activities are. Then you need to measure yourself against those. And of course, you need to reward yourself for the accomplishments that you have. So that's a good personal system. So there are 2 things that we need to do that we can do relatively easy to hold other people accountable. This can be complicated. You can have a lot of different ways of doing this. You can have job descriptions and a bunch of different things. I'm not going to get into all of that today. But fundamentally, we have to trust each other. And so if you're working with people and you haven't dealt with this issue, if you don't have trust with the people that you're working with, then it's pretty hard to build accountability. So this is just broken out into the first 3 C's of trust, which are concern, candor, and competence. It always was so interesting to me when I was supervising my salespeople that when I got involved with a performance problem, typically the role that I played was the one that said, do you realize that your job is in jeopardy? So I was candid with them about what was going on. We tend to not show concern, be candid, and be competent in terms of what we do, in terms of forming trust. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, it's pretty hard to come across as being competent. The real big deal, though, is 4 and 5, consistent communications. So this red, blue, green, and black balls there, they illustrate, this is what most of our conversations look like with people. Most of the time when we're having a conversation with people, I've got the black balls and the other person's got the colored balls. And then we come away wondering why nothing happened as a result of that discussion. It's absolutely amazing to me. When I was at Allen, 99% of the time when people didn't do what they said they were going to do, it's because 2 people didn't talk to each other, or both people talked and nobody listened. So this idea of having consistent communications really is an accountability issue. So several years ago, I went to a workshop and I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what I call fat communications. So most of our communications with people is fat. It's vague, it's not clear enough, it tends to be not structured. And so, because I believe everybody shows up and wants to do the right thing, you have to ask yourself, why don't they? It's usually because we gave them fat communications. So my recommendation is that we learn to talk with people in what I call a lean accountability system. And so most of the time, you might not realize this, but when I'm working with people, I'm going to follow this pattern. I'm going to make sure that I've set clear expectations. I'm going to inspect what I expect, and I'm going to provide for consequences for all of those things. And it is amazing how, if you do these 3 steps, how it cleans things up. What's unusual is when you first start working with people and they don't realize that you're going to hold them accountable, they have old patterns which we have taught people. Dale, to your point, we've taught them how to misbehave in the past because we ask people to do things and then we don't hold them accountable for it. So when I work with people, and hopefully you all see this in me, I'm going to be back. we're going to talk about, and we're going to get it clear, but we're going to inspect what we expect, and then there's going to be accountability on both parties for what we do. So this, I think you will, if you'll just execute on this one thing, you will find that it will really clean up a lot of things in your relationships. Recently, a client that I got really from Josh Turner, a couple of years ago, introduced me to a problem-solving system. And this is not something that I've done up until just recently. I'm currently working with that client on this system. But I never thought of problem-solving as a system. I never really realized that you could systematize problem-solving. And so that's what we're doing. And this owner thinks so highly of this. We're taking all of his employees through this process. So what it says is that you're solving problems. You want to see the problem. You want to own the problem. You want to solve the problem. And you want to act on the problem. So this system is taken from the book, The Oz Principle. And I found it to be really effective. In there are assessments that you can take, and you can see just how well you feel you can do on this. But 99% of failures come from people who have the habit of making excuses. Most of the time, when people don't perform, it's because they don't see the fact that they're not performing, and they excuse it, and they blame someone else. So in the book, they talk about below-the-line behavior. Below-the-line behavior is when people don't accept responsibility for things and they excuse their behavior in the problem-solving process. And I'm sure it happens to you. You've seen that happen to you in your own careers. So what the book says is you can't tolerate it. You can't have trust and have people who can't take responsibility for what they do. And so you have to extinct below-the-line behavior if you're going to continue to work with those people. And I'm sure if you think about it, you all have relationships that fall into that category. So in order to have mutual accountability, where everyone is responsible, they do what they call above-the-line behavior, which is to see the problem, own the problem, solve the problem, and do it. And so we're teaching his management team to solve problems in this way. Most of the time, people start solving the problem before they see the problem. Right? I mean, we are all over it. We know it's not right, and so here we go. But we really haven't sat down, back to Sam Carpenter's thing about drilling down, lower. We haven't really identified what the problem is. Because most of the time we're dealing with the symptoms of the problem, not the problem itself, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I love this. The second part, the own it part, it is amazing how everybody sees the other person as owning the problem, but I don't have any problems, right? So we sit down, we're going to solve the problem. It's clear to me what you're going to do, but it isn't clear to me that I own the other half of it. So owning the problem, and then once everybody owns it, what are you going to do to solve it? It's amazing how the teamwork is so much better when everybody sees it and owns it and we're working on the same things, and then you have to, of course, act on it. So this is such a simple system. They told me, gee, this is the way you do it, Bill. Well, I wished I would have written the book. I didn't, but this system is really cool. I mean, it really will, when you're solving problems, if you can discipline yourself to do it in this way, I think you'll find that the results will be far superior. So can you imagine that maybe these people have some accountability systems to be able to fly in formation like this? So this is what this client shows is that he wants his company to run this way. He wants people to be flying in formation. And obviously you can do that with these kinds of systems. So I can highly recommend this book. I think, Glenda, you already have started on it and you're enjoying it.
Love it.
Yeah. It's really...
I find myself in there too. I'm guilty of that below-the-line behavior, but I love in the book, Bill, that it says that happens to us all.
Yeah.
That there are times, whatever we're going through, you can fall below the line in your behavior.
Yeah, at least we know what to call it now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to close with this thought in a couple of slides. Interestingly enough, a lot of people that I work with tell me that they can't do what they need to do because they can't afford it. They have affordability problems. All these things that we're talking about today are free. The book costs, $10 or something. But most of these changes, holding people accountable, being accountable yourself, it doesn't require a huge marketing budget to be able to do that. You just have to practice the right habits and the right disciplines in order to get that accomplished. So I think my question to you is, are you willing to commit to being more accountable? And here's just a few ideas about how to do that. So what questions do you have about today? Josh.
What's the best way to take somebody?
Great question, Josh. So Josh asked the question, how can I execute this in my organization? So what Philip had me do is he had me take the assessments, and we have everybody take the assessments, and then we talk about the assessments. So first of all, people begin to realize, what's going on. And so I would start with the assessments. You can take them, get them electronically and have people do that. And it kind of creates an awareness, and then they want to know more about, here's the problem. But I would start with the assessments, Josh. I think it's easy to do. Of course, read the book yourself first, I think. But Chris.
I can't remember if I learned this year, so I apologize. But
I find that these systems work for up and down. I mean, I try to practice the same kind of accountability with, if other owners or whatever, everybody. You might share the idea with them, or sometimes you have to teach them, but I think these systems apply to everybody, not just lower level people. Jared. Anyone else? Great, thank you. Enjoyed it.